everybody, it's Mr. Gray here. Thank you again for another great week. We made it through the rain on Thursday, but it was so nice to be back with your students. It's great to see them again and get back to class and the kinds of things that we started at the beginning of the year. So we had a lot of fun this week. Hope you ask your students about Mystery City and some of the New Year's resolutions that we had worked on, and also the reading we had this week was called The Gift of the Magi. And so you can really ask them about all those things and maybe start to get in that habit as we're looking toward the second half of the year and starting to think about sixth grade and middle school. I know that's in the back of everyone's mind. So make sure you're having those conversations just about what's happening in class. What are they thinking about? What are they talking about? What are they doing? I think those would be really helpful. No big announcements this week, but right on to academics. In Reader's Workshop, we're starting a new unit called Argument and Advocacy. The kids are going to be taking informational texts, mostly articles, and putting together arguments and having debates. So we're going to work our way into that and get ready for it and talk about how to argue and how to debate and how to gather information and strategies for that. But for the next few weeks, what we'll spend our time doing is looking at these informational texts and debating a topic. And they'll do that between students, so just like one-on-one, they'll have a debate and kind of reflect on that. They'll do that in a larger group, and then in a larger group, and even we'll have probably a whole class debate by the time we get through a few weeks. And we'll look at all these different topics that are relevant to the kids, they might have an opinion on, but we'll really try to take their opinions and look at what evidence we have. We'll ask students to take the side they don't believe in sometimes to try to argue for it, and so we'll have a lot of fun with that. At home, the kids might be prepping for their argument some nights if they have homework, or they might be just reading their fiction books. Next week, the kids are going to get a grade just based on filling out their reading log, following through on their homework, and just if they do it every night. So that's happening. Also, by the end of the week next week, we'll have our first little quiz for reading in that unit. They took a little quiz this last week and had a flash draft of an essay based on the reading, and next week they'll have a short quiz on some of the things we're studying about arguing and debating. In Writer's Workshop, the work in writing is going to really, go hand in hand with reading. We're doing a unit called Research-Based Argument Essay, and so as you can imagine, we're going to talk about researching a topic. And it's going to just go right along with what we're doing in reading. The kids will have to gather evidence and then put that together in a well-structured, well-formed, coherent essay. And so we'll get started on that next week. In math, we're going to start a unit called Whole Number Expressions and Operations. It's going to start next week with some review, which is just multiplying and dividing semi-large numbers. And specifically, we're going to kind of go through that quick, but really talk about different strategies the kids use to solve that. I'm going to make sure there's some that they know that I've seen before. And then we're really going to talk about precision and really attending to precision and where mistakes come up, both in multiplying and dividing. And the kids will have a quick little quiz on Friday on multiplying and dividing. For social studies, we're going to do a couple things next week. The first thing is that the kids are going to look at and kind of break down how some of the colonies were set up as a society, like how they worked, what rules there were, how they enforced laws, what their economy looked like, things like that. And then they're going to actually get in a little group and make their own society. It will take a little bit from the colonies that we know about, and will mostly take their own creativity, and they'll have to put together their own little colony and what rules and what they are known for and what their like economy is based on what they make, and that'll be really interesting. And then after that, we're going to look at something called the First Great Awakening, which was a period leading up to the revolution in the 1740s and 1750s. And basically, it was a big change in how society kind of viewed religion and how the religion of the colonies worked. And so we're really going to look at that carefully because it had a really direct impact on the revolution coming up, because it kind of had this like new American ideal. So that was, one of the first times where the colonies as a whole had this kind of new way of looking at things. And so it was almost like it was the first time where it was like, oh, this is like an American thing, not just a specific colony thing or an English thing. It's like, oh, we're starting to think of ourselves as Americans. And so it is this really interesting time period, culturally, and it's also this interesting time period leading up to the revolution. In science, of course, at the end of the week, they'll see Ms. DeMarco, but our part in class next week, we're going to look at food chains and talk about how energy moves through a food chain and just kind of strengthen our knowledge in that department. We'll go on to our next set of Latin roots, which are torquio, verso, and sub. So we'll go through those and kind of do some work. After our first week, this week, the weeks for Latin roots go, or classic roots and the other vocab we're going to do go Wednesday to Wednesday. So by Wednesday, we'll finish our first set of Latin roots. By the next Wednesday, we will have taken a test on both the first and second sections of Latin roots. So there's a lot coming up, as always, but I'm so glad to be back and so glad to see all the kids and have a great time. So have a nice weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.